I caught her sneaking out of my apartment at 2 a.m. My safe was open, and $7,800 was missing. My fiancée glared and said, "We're family. That means you owe us." I just nodded, but when she came back days later, someone was waiting for her inside, and it wasn't me. I want you to picture something for me. It's 2 in the morning. The apartment is dead quiet. I'm lying in bed, half asleep, the kind of sleep where you're not really gone, you're just hovering somewhere between a dream about missing a deadline and the sound of your own breathing. And then I hear it, a zip. One specific, careful, trying not to be heard zip, followed by the slow creak of the front door, followed by nothing because whoever was on the other side of that door had just stepped into the hallway and pulled it closed behind them like they were defusing a bomb. I lay there for exactly 4 seconds. Then something in my stomach said, "Lewis, get up." I got up. The first thing I noticed was that Brittany's side of the bed was empty. The pillow was cold. The second thing I noticed was that the closet door was open and the small fireproof safe I keep on the top shelf. The one I have specifically because I do freelance work and sometimes clients pay me in cash, and I have trust issues which turns out were extremely justified. That safe was sitting with its door wide open, its little combination lock dangling like a disappointed tongue. I looked inside, $7,800. Gone. My hands started shaking before my brain caught up. I stood there in my boxer shorts and a faded Charlotte FC t-shirt, in my own apartment at 2 in the morning, staring into an empty safe like a man who has just been informed that gravity no longer applies to him specifically. I called her phone. She picked up on the second ring. "Lewis," she said, and her voice had that particular quality it gets when she's been caught doing something and has decided that the best defense is complete, committed offense. I can explain. "Where are you?" A pause. The hallway. She was still in the building. I opened the front door. She was standing there in her pink pajamas and her little Chanel crossbody bag, hair in a ponytail, looking for all the world like someone who had just been about to go get a glass of water and had gotten slightly lost. The bag, I noticed, was unusually full. "Brittany," I said, "where is the $7,800 that was in my safe?" She lifted her chin, and what she said next, I want you to remember this, because this is the sentence that changed the entire next 3 weeks of my life. "We're family, Lewis. That means you owe us." I just nodded. I nodded very slowly and very calmly in the way that a person nods when they have just made a decision so large and so specific that there isn't room for any other expression on their face yet. "Okay," I said, and I went back to bed, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back, because you need the full picture. My name is Lewis. I'm 34 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, South End, specifically in a 1-bedroom apartment that I chose entirely for the natural light, because I spend approximately 10 hours a day looking at a screen, and I need to remember that the sun exists. I'm a graphic designer. I've been doing it for 11 years. I do brand identity work, packaging design, some web UI when the client is nice, and I charge enough to live comfortably because I earned the right to, after 4 years of charging, not enough and slowly losing my mind. I make around $78,000 a year, plus freelance on top of that. I am proud of what I do. I care about kerning in a way that most people find genuinely alarming. I have strong opinions about fonts, and I will share them with you whether you asked or not. I am by nature a patient person. Patient to a fault, as it turns out. The kind of patient where people slowly come to understand that patience is simply a renewable resource you have, and they will keep drawing from it indefinitely. I met Brittany. Brittany Holloway, 28, professional sunshine, hair the color of actual honey, at a mutual friend's rooftop birthday party about 2 years before any of this happened. She laughed at something I said about Comic Sans, and I fell in love immediately, the way you do when you are a graphic designer and someone validates your darkest grievances. She was warm and funny and enthusiastic, and she had this energy like every room she walked into had just been upgraded. I proposed after 14 months. She said yes so fast, she almost knocked the ring box out of my hand. There was, however, one thing about Brittany that I understood in theory, but consistently underestimated in practice. Brittany was a shopaholic. And I do not mean this in the charming Sex in the City. Oh, she just loves shoes way. I mean this in the clinical, she has a relationship with Retail that bypasses her prefrontal cortex entirely way. I mean this in the she once spent $400 on a cashmere eye mask at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday way. I mean this in the way where I would come home and there would be 12 new packages in the hallway and she would look at them with the specific expression of someone who knows they did something but isn't entirely sure what it was. She was aware of it. She'd been to 2 therapists about it. One of them had somehow also become her shopping consultant. She had a support group. The support group had a Facebook page. The Facebook page sometimes had sponsored posts. She found this deeply funny and also could not stop clicking the links. I loved her. I genuinely loved her. And I kept telling myself the shopping thing was manageable, was being managed, was a process. I said it so many times, I started to believe it the way you believe a weather forecast, not because you're certain, but because you need to make plans. For the 22 months that Brittany and I were together before the night in question, I had, in various configurations, financially absorbed the following. Her half of every restaurant bill for a year and a half because she was going through something financially, and I understood finances better. $2,300 in credit card interest payments, twice, because the interest is criminal. Lewis, it's basically theft. She was not wrong about the interest being criminal, but she was also the person who had charged $4,600 to that card on what she described as a vintage furniture phase that lasted 11 days. 3 months of her car insurance totaling $847 because her account was having issues. The issues were that there was no money in it. A deeply unnecessary but very beautiful $1,200 espresso machine that was technically a joint purchase, but that Brittany selected, Brittany ordered, and Brittany operated exclusively. While I continued to make coffee in my French press, like a functioning adult. And the one that really, if I'm being honest with myself, should have been my signal. The $340 purchase on some website called mystictreasures.something, which when I asked about it, she described as just a little spiritual investment. I did not ask further questions. I should have asked further questions, because the $340 was, as it turned out, a deposit. And the deposit was for something very specific. And the something very specific is why $7,800 was missing from my safe. Now I need to pause here and tell you about the item in question, because without this context, the rest of the story makes no sense, and also because I think you deserve to know exactly what kind of situation you're dealing with. There is, apparently, a market for what collectors call spirit vessels. These are decorative bottles, ornate, antique-looking, often genuinely antique, that various sellers on certain corners of the internet describe as containing benevolent entities, luck spirits, wish-granting presences, or, in the specific case that Brittany had identified, a djinn of abundance and fortune, allegedly sealed inside a 19th century Persian-style cobalt glass bottle with a brass stopper and hand-etched gold filigree. The seller's name, I would later discover, was Mystic Qley 88, and he operated out of what appeared to be an Etsy-adjacent platform called Shimmervault. He had 847 reviews averaging 4.9 stars. Many of the reviews said things like, "I can feel the energy," and "my luck changed overnight," and one said, very specifically, "My cat seemed uncomfortable with it at first, but has since come around." The bottle was listed at $7,800. Free shipping. Brittany had wanted it for 6 months. She had, in those 6 months, mentioned it to me exactly 3 times. Once while showing me her phone in the way that means, please notice this. Once in a context I couldn't parse until now. And once when she said, during what I had thought was an unrelated conversation about our savings. I just think that sometimes you have to invest in things that are going to change your whole trajectory. You know? I had said, and gone back to looking at a logo draft. What she had actually been calculating, I now understood, was whether she could access $7,800 without me noticing until after the djinn was already in the apartment. The answer, at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, turned out to be no. She came back the next day with her mother, Linda, 53, the origin point of Brittany's shopping gene, owner of 6 QVC credit accounts and a storage unit in Gastonia. And they sat across from me on my own couch, and Linda explained, with the conviction of someone presenting a court case, that Brittany had done nothing wrong, and that my attitude was controlling, and that in a real partnership, money is shared. I said, Linda, I would love to discuss partnership economics at another time, but right now I'd like to know where the $7,800 is. Brittany said the transfer had already been made to Mystic Khalid 88. The gin bottle was in the mail. I sat with this for a moment. Okay, I said, and something shifted inside me, very quietly, the way a foundation shifts before a building does anything dramatic. Nothing visible yet, just a small, decisive realignment somewhere load-bearing. That night, I opened my banking app. 2 taps. I moved the remainder of my savings out of the joint account we had been building toward our wedding into a personal account Brittany didn't know existed. Then I called the building's front desk and left a note for the night security guard named Dominic, who I had been bringing coffee every Thursday for 2 years and who considered me, I believe, a genuine friend. I told Dominic that in a few days someone might be coming to the apartment, and I had a small, specific request. And then I started making a call. Okay, so here's the part of the story where I need you to understand something about me. I am a graphic designer. I work with visual information for a living. I understand systems, layouts, staging, and, most critically, I understand presentation. I understand how to make something look like something. I understand how to create an environment so specific and so committed that the moment a person walks into it, they have already understood something before a single word has been spoken. I also, as it happens, have a very good friend named Marcus. Marcus is 37. Marcus does theatrical set design for a mid-sized production company in Uptown Charlotte. Marcus owes me a significant favor because I redesigned his entire professional portfolio website for free during a period when he was, in his words, emotionally between clients. Marcus has a warehouse full of props. Marcus, when I called him at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday and explained the situation in full detail, went completely silent for a long moment and then said, very quietly, Lewis, are you asking me what I think you're asking me? I need the apartment to look like something specific, I said. Tell me. And I told him. What Marcus and I built over the course of 4 days while Brittany was staying at her mother's house in Mooresville and presumably awaiting the arrival of her djinn was the following. A complete, immersive, floor-to-ceiling transformation of my one-bedroom apartment into what can only be described as a high-end mystical antiquities and spirit vessel consultation parlor. I want to be very clear about the scope of this. This was not a few candles and some purple fabric. This was a project. Marcus brought low-light LED rigs. He brought velvet curtains in deep burgundy that went floor to ceiling over my regular curtains. He brought 2 ornate standing shelves from a production of something Victorian he'd done in 2021. And we filled them with antique-looking bottles, brass instruments, crystal objects, and small cards with handwritten labels and a script font I printed specifically for the occasion. I had the labels typeset. I chose a typeface called Corinthia. I kerned every label by hand. One of them said, Gin of Mild Inconvenience. Contained. One said, Entity of Recursive Regret, do not open. One said, Spirit of Reasonable Expectations, sealed 1887. We set up a consultation table in the center of the living room, with a deep green velvet tablecloth, 2 chairs, and a brass reading lamp. On the table, inside a small velvet-lined display box with a glass lid, we placed a cobalt blue bottle. Not an expensive cobalt blue bottle. A cobalt blue bottle I had found at HomeGoods for $14.99, which Marcus had dressed with gold paint, pen filigree, and a small hand-stamped brass stopper sourced from a craft store in Noda. It looked, I will say this without embarrassment, extraordinary. Where the apartment number usually was, Marcus had affixed a small brass plaque that read, Murdian House, VSL Authentication, and Spiritual Authentication and Spiritual Antiquities by APO appointment only. We had, in effect, turned my apartment into a fake antique gin dealership. And then I called a man named Gerald. Gerald is 61. Gerald is Dominic, the security guard's uncle. Gerald spent 30 years doing community theater in Concord, North Carolina, and has never, in those 30 years, been given a role he felt truly captured his range. Gerald has a voice like a mahogany cabinet and the specific bearing of a man who believes deeply that every room he enters has been waiting for him. I explained to Gerald what I needed. I explained the character. A distinguished, deeply knowledgeable spirit vessel authentication specialist, here to evaluate the legitimacy of a recently acquired piece. Gerald said, "Is there a costume?" I said, "There is a costume." Gerald said, "I'm in." I sourced Gerald a 3-piece suit in charcoal, a pocket watch on a chain, a small jeweler's loop, and a leather-bound notebook with gold edging that I had actually designed the cover of, which read Meridian Authentication Record, Volume XLVI. I printed it at Staples. The woman at the Staples print counter looked at it for a long moment and then just said, "Nice." Brittany came back on a Saturday afternoon. She had the gin bottle. I know this because she texted me approximately 47 times in the preceding 24 hours about the gin bottle. It had arrived. It was beautiful. You could feel something. The energy was real. She was sorry about the money, but she knew once she had it home, everything would make sense. She walked in, she stopped, she looked at my apartment, which she had last seen, containing normal furniture and a poster of a Dieter Rams exhibition, now looked like the back room of a shop in an 1890s Cairo marketplace crossed with the set of a Guillermo del Toro film. Gerald was seated at the consultation table. He looked up from his notebook, adjusted his pocket watch, and said, in a voice that could have settled livestock, "Ah, you must be Miss Holloway. We've been expecting you. Please, sit." Brittany sat. She sat. The way a person sits when their brain is buffering. Gerald introduced himself as Dr. Emmett Ashford, Senior Authentication Specialist, Meridian House, established in 1994. He explained that Meridian House had been contacted. He gestured vaguely, which suggested by someone with authority, without naming anyone, regarding a recent high-value vessel acquisition originating from a third-party dealer operating under the name Mystic Khalid 88. Brittany's eyes went very wide. Gerald opened the authentication notebook. He produced the loop. He asked, with enormous seriousness, if he could examine the vessel. Brittany, completely hypnotized by the atmosphere, and by Gerald's voice, and by the general authority of the whole setup, handed him the gin bottle she had paid $7,800 for. Gerald examined it for a long, solemn time. He held it to the light. He made a sound. He made several sounds. Actually, small, considered sounds. The kind that communicate deep concern to anyone in the vicinity. Then he set it down and looked at her very seriously. "Miss Holloway," he said, "I need to ask you a few questions about your acquisition." What followed was a 17-minute authentication consultation, during which Gerald, drawing on 30 years of theatrical instinct and genuine improvisational talent, established the following. That Mystic Khalid 88 was known to Meridian House as a Category 2 misrepresentation vendor. That the bottle Brittany had purchased was a late reproduction, specifically a Hungarian decorative flask from approximately 1987. That the entity described in the listing, the Gin of Abundance and Fortune, was, in the professional assessment of Meridian House, most likely an echo impression, possibly residual, certainly not transactional. Brittany said, "What does that mean?" Gerald said, "It means, Miss Holloway, that whatever was in this bottle, if anything, has almost certainly moved on. You may have purchased a very nice decorative item." The silence that followed this was, I will say, one of the most specific silences I have ever been present for. "I paid," Brittany said slowly, $7,800. Said Gerald, with the compassion of a funeral director. "Yes, we see this often." I had been standing in the kitchen this entire time, making tea visible through the doorway. I had not said a word. When Brittany finally turned around and saw me standing there calmly holding a mug, Her expression went through approximately 6 emotions in about 4 seconds. "Lewis," she said, "what is happening?" "I have no idea what you mean." I said, "Would you like some tea?" This is the moment I genuinely did not plan for, because what Brittany did next was not get angry. What Brittany did was start laughing. Not a little, a lot. The kind of laughing that starts in your chest and has nowhere to go. The kind that comes out when your brain decides that the alternative, the non-laughing alternative, is too large to process. "You?" She laughed for a solid minute and a half. Gerald looked at me. I looked at Gerald. Gerald gave me the single most dignified shrug I have ever witnessed from a man in a 3-piece suit. Here is what happened after that. In order, Brittany called her friend Jasmine. Jasmine, who was supposed to be on Brittany's side, arrived 20 minutes later, took one look at the apartment, looked at Gerald, who was still seated at the consultation table because no one had told him the scene was over, looked at the bottle labeled Spirit of Reasonable Expectations, sealed 1887, and completely lost the ability to speak. Jasmine took 17 photos. US Massive posted 3 of them to a group chat called The Girls. Within 6 minutes, the group chat had 42 responses, approximately 30 of which were variations of "I am screaming," and 8 of which were just the skull emoji. Someone in the group chat, nobody knows who, screenshotted it and posted it to a local Charlotte Facebook group called Charlotte Shenanigans and Neighborhood Tea. The post said, "My friend's fiancé turned his entire apartment into a fake antique D-Gin dealership to teach her a lesson about spending $7,800 on an eBay genie, and I am not okay." It got 847 likes in 3 hours. Linda, Brittany's mother, called Brittany's phone at 9:47 p.m. from a Cracker Barrel parking lot in Mooresville, specifically to say that she had seen the Facebook post, that she was frankly disturbed, and also to ask if she could have the burgundy curtains when we were done, because they would look gorgeous in the guest room. She was, apparently, not willing to take a side on the moral question until the curtain situation was resolved. Marcus, who had helped build the whole thing, found out about the Facebook post at 11 p.m. and texted me, "Lewis, you understand that I am going to list this on my professional portfolio. This is my best work. I need you to know that." You had been given my number by Dominic, called me at 10 the next morning to tell me that his sister had seen the Facebook post and had sent it to her book club, and the book club had discussed it at their meeting and voted unanimously that what I had done was unhinged but fair, which he said with the energy of a man who had just received a standing ovation. A woman named Patricia from Kannapolis, who is not connected to any of us in any traceable way, commented on the Facebook post, "The Spirit of Reasonable Expectations, sealed 18887, label sent me. That is art. That man is a designer." This is the comment I screenshot and have saved on my phone as my phone wallpaper. Brittany's cousin Derek, who had previously expressed no opinion about anything related to our relationship, texted Brittany at midnight. The gin bottle label said, "Do not open. I'm dead, Brit. I'm so dead." He was supposed to be on Brittany's side. He was not on Brittany's side. He was, from that point forward, very much enjoying being on the universe's side. Here's what I didn't expect. About 4 days after everything happened, Brittany asked if we could talk. We met at a coffee shop on South Boulevard, the one with the exposed brick, the one she always said felt too pretentious, but had the best oat milk. She came in, sat down, and she didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "I know I have a problem. I've known for a long time. But knowing it and actually feeling it are 2 different things. And I think what you did was insane." She paused. "But I also think I needed to see it from the outside." And that was the outside. I said, "You stole $7,800 from me." She said, I know that's what it was. I kept telling myself it was shared money, but it wasn't. And I knew that. I said, "What are you going to do about it?" She said, "I made an appointment with Dr. Ferris, a real one, not the one who became my shopping consultant." She looked at me, and I talked to my mom about the $7,800. She's helping me pay it back, a payment plan. I sat with this. The person I had not expected to be the unexpected ally in this story was, of all people, Linda. I found out later that the night of the Facebook post, after the curtain inquiry, Linda had sat Brittany down and said something that apparently cut through everything. What she said, according to Brittany, was, "Honey, I watch you. And I see me. And I don't like what I've done to myself, and I don't want to watch you do it too." Linda said it in a Cracker Barrel parking lot at 9:47 p.m., which is somehow the exact right setting for a piece of genuine maternal truth. Linda has since then canceled 2 of her QVC accounts. This is not a fairy tale, so I want to be clear. She still has 4. Here is where we are now. Brittany and I did not get married. Not yet. We agreed, mutually, that we needed to slow down, that the engagement had been something we were both running toward faster than we'd actually prepared for. She is in therapy. Real therapy weekly with someone who does not sell her things. She is paying me back, not fast, but steadily. Last month, she sent $400. We still talk. We had dinner at her place last week. She made pasta, which she's actually very good at, and we watched something dumb on Netflix and argued about whether the main character made any logical decisions, which she said yes to, and I said no, and it felt almost normal. Her apartment has no gin bottle in it. The $14.99 Home Goods Cobalt bottle, however, is sitting on her windowsill. She kept it. She said it has better energy than the one she paid $7,800 for, and honestly, based on the week we had, I think she might not be entirely wrong. The Meridian House plaque is still in my storage unit. Gerald has asked twice if he can put it in his theatrical portfolio under immersive installation. I told him yes. It is his best work. It is also genuinely mine. Are we a perfect couple? No. Are we even a couple right now? Not exactly. But are we honest with each other for the first time in probably 18 months? Yeah, I think so. And sometimes healing starts in the most specific, most absurd, most completely unhinged way you can imagine. Sometimes it starts with a velvet tablecloth and a man named Gerald wearing a pocket watch and a leather-bound book titled Meridian Authentication Record, Volume XLVII, explaining, with total dignity, that the gin has moved on. I genuinely did not plan for that part, but I would absolutely do it again. If this hits something, you already know what to do.